Well, last week we started a new sermon series on living as disciples for the transformation of the world. And we looked last week at the parable of the Good Samaritan and what we can learn about being a disciple from the Good Samaritan are two things. That first, we are called to be neighbors to everybody. When the lawyer asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" he was really asking, who's not my neighbor? Who do I not need to worry about? Who do I not need to love? And Jesus told him, essentially, everybody is your neighbor. There's not anyone that you should not love. There's not anyone that you should not help. The other thing we learned about being a disciple from the Good Samaritan is that being a disciple requires sacrifice. The Good Samaritan, in stopping to help the man who was beaten and left for dead on the side of the road, gave up time. He gave up money. He gave up his comfort by allowing the beaten man to ride on his animal while the Good Samaritan walked. He gave up part of his future when he said he would come back to the inn and check to see how this man was doing. And so a disciple also sacrifices, and that's something that we aren't necessarily accustomed to doing in today's age. Brief synopsis of last week, because I know with the snow, several people couldn't make it. But you kind of need that information so you can receive today's sermon, where we're talking about, if you didn't figure out from the kids, the story of Mary and Martha. So, pop quiz time, but I'm taking it with you. How many of you here today have a problem with getting distracted? Oh, wow. Okay, you notice my hand's up too. Seems like something that many of us deal with. Many of us are just like a character I want you to watch on the screen in this little video clip.
Speak!
Hi there.
Did that dog just say hi there?
Oh, yes.
Bruh!
My name is Doug. I have just met you, and I love you. My master made me this collar. He is a good and smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
My master made me this collar so I could squirrel. Doug obviously has a little problem with distraction as well. Squirrels, or at least something representing a squirrel, can be problematic for me. I can't tell you how many times that I've started to complete a task and it takes me 2 or maybe even 3 times longer than it should because I end up doing several additional things along the way. Are you with me here on this? You know, and then after a while, it's like, wait a minute. I came into this room for a specific reason. What was it? Because I've forgotten because of all the extemporaneous things I did along the way. Sermon writing is the biggest challenge for me with distractions. If I try to do it at home, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I've got to go do that laundry. Oh, there's dishes in the sink, which I'm going to be honest, or else my husband will call me out. The dishes, I think about them, but do I do them? No. Or I'm thinking, oh, I need to go do that, or I need to go do this. And so I get up from writing the sermon and go and do that and come back. And then a few minutes later, there's another something else that pops into my mind. So that's what happens when I do it at home. If I try to write my sermons here, the phone rings, someone pops into the office, sticks their head in, we start talking. So I usually end up either going to a coffee shop or maybe one of the cubicles at the library where I can just sit down, zone out of everything, and focus on writing my sermons. The culture that we live in today is filled with plenty of distractions. We have our devices. We have our phones, any number of electronic gadgets that remind us in the back of my head, oh, you better check your email. Or, gosh, it's been about 2 minutes since I've updated my social media status. That's for a certain demographic sitting here and up there. They're updating their social media status. Oh my goodness. But it's easy for us to blame everything on electronics. But the fact of the matter is, people have been distracted for ages before we had all of these electronic devices. The way that we become distracted now is different from the way that it used to be, but the one thing that hasn't changed is the amount of self-discipline it takes to not allow ourselves to become distracted. Now, there are lots of reasons that we can be distracted. For some, it's because there is so much on their plate that it's easy to forget all of the things that are actually sitting on that plate waiting for us to do until we're reminded of it. For others, the tasks that they need to accomplish aren't necessarily something that they want to do, and so they look for distractions to avoid doing what they need to. And then, of course, there's always those that just have a hard time concentrating on one thing at a time. Well, today, we're going to look at the story of Mary and Martha that's found in Luke. And it's a story about distraction. Chances are you have maybe heard this story before, about the sisters Mary and Martha, but like last week, we're going to look at it from a different point of view. The story of Mary and Martha is found in Luke chapter 10, starting with verse 38. Now, as they went on their way, this is Jesus, entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." So oftentimes when we hear this story or we study this story, the conclusion that we come to is this: Mary is the good sister because she sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was teaching, and Martha is the bad sister because instead of listening to Jesus, she was in the kitchen cleaning up and pouting that Mary wasn't helping her. And so the lesson that we come away with is, don't be like Martha, be like Mary. So all of us Marthas out there are left with feelings of guilt when all we're trying to do is make sure that everyone is taken care of and that the kitchen is clean. Now let's work with that theory for a minute, because there is a lot of validity to this argument. Think of everything that Martha missed out on while she was in the kitchen. The teaching that Jesus offered at that Jesus offered at that particular time. The missed opportunity that Martha had failed to take advantage of to be at the feet of Christ. Did the meal need to be prepared and the kitchen need to be cleaned up? Absolutely. Of course it did. I think the issue that Jesus is bringing up with Martha when he tells her that Mary chose better, that Mary made the better decision, was that Martha needed to spend time with Jesus, not for his sake, but for hers. Jesus didn't need to be doted on to boost his morale or his ego. He wanted Martha to sit down and learn from him for her sake, not for his. Christ wants the same thing for us. He wants us to sit at his feet and learn from him while not being distracted about the dirty dishes in the kitchen or whatever it is that we allow ourselves to be distracted with. He wants us to spend time on our relationship with him every day, on a daily basis. Take a moment and just think of someone that you love and care for a lot. It could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a family member, it could be a good friend. How much time do you spend with that person? Do you spend time with them daily? How strong would a marriage be if a couple only spent a few minutes of time here and there talking, listening, developing their relationship? Chances are that relationship would not be very strong. So why would our relationship with God be any different? If we're only spending a couple of minutes with him every day, which is better than nothing, don't get me wrong. But if we're only spending a small amount of time with Christ daily, or the only time we spend even thinking about God is at this time on Sunday morning, our relationship with God is not as full as it could be. You get into something, you get out of something that what you put into it. If you want a stronger relationship with God, you have to spend the time developing it. True disciples of Christ find that time to spend. Now, let me rephrase that a little bit. Disciples find quality time to spend with God. Not just an afterthought, not just one of those breath prayers, Lord, keep me from killing my kid. I said that one a lot, especially about my son. That's better than nothing. But spending 30, 40, 60 minutes with God, quality time, learning from his feet, or learning at his feet by studying his word, praying with him, conversing with him, listening, that is going to be the much more full relationship. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist tradition, woke early every morning. He woke up at 4 a.m. in order to spend 2 hours in prayer and meditation. That meant he was in bed by 10 every night. Now, I'm not saying that's what everybody here needs to be doing. Although if you want to make that your goal, great. Just please keep in mind at 4 a.m. I'm still snoozing. Don't call. What I am saying, though, is that we might need to adjust our daily routines in order to find that quality time. So what does that look like? It looks like a dedicated time of intentionality. Maybe you need to put it on your daily calendar. But it's a time of intentionally putting everything away, all distractions, anything that might creep into our mind, and spending quality time with God. All you are focusing on is God. The hard part about that, though, is those mental distractions that enter in. You know, we can turn the TV off, we can put the phone, turn it off, or put it on vibrate, put it in a different room. We can be in a room where there's no dirty laundry piled up or there's no dirty dishes in the sink. We can control all of those physical things. But the minute that we sit down and try to spend time with God, there is an enemy out there that will shoot a thought into your mind. It's those mental distractions that we have to train ourselves not to allow. It's called a spiritual discipline for a reason. We have to, in other words, using the words of Professor Severus Snape, discipline your mind. I got my Harry Potter fans up here. You must discipline your mind. There are lots of tools out there to help us do this, and you don't have to try and do it all by yourself. There are devotional books and magazines. We have the Upper Room devotionals out here at the welcome table. You can take them for free. You can get daily devotions through your email if you can resist the temptation to look at every other email as you're trying to find your daily devotion. If this is a new practice for you, start small. Start with just a few minutes and grow from there. And I guarantee the more you learn about God, the more that you'll want to learn. The more you learn, the more you want to learn. And the more time you'll spend with God. You'll find that those few minutes have expanded. And then, just like anything else you enjoy doing, the time will seem to fly by. Don't get discouraged by something you don't understand. That's what I hear a lot. Well, I try to sit down and I read the Bible and then I don't understand it, and so it just bums me out, and so I give up. Don't give up. Find someone that you can ask. My email, my phone number are on the bulletin insert each week. Call me, email me, just not at 4 a.m., please. I will get back to you, I promise. Unless, of course, I'm in the middle of my devotion time. But let's flip the story of Mary and Martha over and look at it from another angle. It involves a more critical look and a little bit of Greek. What was Martha so upset about? This is one that you can respond to. Why was Martha so upset in the story? She was trying to do it all by herself, and Mary wasn't helping. Imagine that. Two siblings having a squabble about household chores. That's what we tend to think about this story. But if we look at what is actually written, what I actually read, Luke never mentions a meal. Now, could that have been what Martha is doing? Absolutely. That would have been the custom at the time. You welcome someone into your house, you feed them. That's why we have all of the jokes about Jewish hospitality, and that they would welcome a guest, and everything in the household for that time that the guest was there revolved about welcoming them and doing whatever needed to be done to make them feel comfortable. So yes, Martha very easily could have been preparing the meal and having to deal with all the kitchen duties. And some translations of the Bible do actually mention a meal. The Common English translation says, Martha was preoccupied with getting everything ready for their meal. The version I read from was the New Revised Standard. And it said, Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So which way is it? We have to go to the original Greek to find out. Luke uses a very technical term to describe Martha's work. It's diakonia. That's what it looks like in the Greek language. And there are actually several definitions of this word. The first is service, ministering, especially of those who execute the command of others. The next one is, to those who by the command of God proclaim and promote religion among mankind. This word, this Greek word, is where we get the English word deacon from. So that that definition leads to the deacon. The third definition, the ministration of those who render to others the offices of Christian affection, especially those who help meet need by either collecting or distributing of charities. The fourth is the office of the deacon in the church. And the last definition, the very last one, 5 of 5, the service of those who prepare and present food. So there's a lot of other definitions that come before that idea of serving food. Now, Luke uses diaconia 8 times within the book of Luke and Acts. And 6 of those 8 times it's used in the context of service or ministering, participating with others in the leadership and ministry in the church and the proclamation of the gospel. So when Luke uses this word, usually it's not about cooking and preparing and cleaning up a meal. Could Martha's activity have been the domestic activity? Sure. But it may well have been that Martha is distracted by all of the ministry tasks that she is responsible for. Chances are it wasn't just Mary and Martha and Jesus in that house. There could have been a lot of people that Martha was looking to serve the needs of that day in ways that went beyond cooking a meal. So it could be that Martha's complaint isn't that Mary's not helping with the meal. It's that Mary is not helping with the ministry that Martha's trying to accomplish. So if we look at this story from that point of view, what can we learn about being a disciple? Perhaps it's this. We shouldn't strive to be Mary or Martha. We should strive to be Mary and Martha. Discipleship involves more than just sitting at the feet of Jesus. It involves being a part of the work of ministry. Now, not all of us are called to be pastors, but we are all called to be ministers of the gospel. People who do the work of God's kingdom. There is a time to sit and be with God, and then there is a time to get to work. It's not either or, it's both and. And there is lots of work to be done. So how is your discipleship in this area? How much time are you spending at the feet of Jesus? And how much time are you spending in service to God? Disciples do both. So let's go be Mary and Martha. Amen.